Welcome to this webinar, Patient Involvement in Research Question Design, Learnings from Breast Cancer Research. I'm Alexandre Alencar, Head of Cancer Research Programs of the Rising Tide Foundation for Clinical Cancer Research. And together with LUNGevity, we are partnering in organizing this series of webinars. Both our foundations have partnered to create a series of webinars to foster collaborations between patient, caregiver, research advocates, and researchers. The webinar series is designed to educate both patients and researchers on how to create different aspects of a clinical trial, provide examples of engagement tools, strategies that have worked well for successful patient-researcher partnerships, and discuss metrics of success for patient-research partnerships. The target audience of this webinar are clinical researchers and patient partners interested in co-creation of the research question. Our objectives are promote patient involvement in research question design and throughout the clinical trial, provide real-world examples of patient-clinician partnerships, and co-creation of the clinical trial. Today, our panelists are Olivia Pagani, the Scientific Chair of the POSITIVE Study, Monica Ruggeri, Operational Lead of the POSITIVE Study, and Teresa Ferriero, Patient Partner of the POSITIVE Study. We would like to welcome all of you, and thank you so much for accepting to join us today at this webinar. Before starting the webinar, we would like to provide you a video about explaining the POSITIVE Study.
Mi chiamo Arianna, ho 41 anni e mi hanno diagnosticato un tumore al seno quando ne avevo 38. Pian piano vedevo che il mio corpo comunque era cambiato e il suo ciclo naturale non era più quello che avevo prima dei trattamenti, e a quel punto ho cominciato veramente a chiedermi se avessi potuto ancora avere dei bambini, se.
Il tumore al seno nelle giovani pazienti rappresenta circa il 7% di tutti i tumori al seno. Questo evento del tumore al seno è qualcosa che travolge le donne come una valanga.
Io ero sposata da 6 mesi, il mio progetto era quello di condividere la vita con mio marito, creare una famiglia, e questo è stato un fulmine a ciel sereno perché chiaramente ho dovuto rimescolare tutte le carte.
Se una donna si ammala a 35 anni ha di fronte a sé 5-10 anni di una terapia che blocca la sua fertilità. Quando l'avrà finita sarà in un'età in cui avere un figlio sarà praticamente impossibile. Per raccogliere dei dati prospettici abbiamo proprio disegnato lo studio POSITIVE. Gli obiettivi dello studio POSITIVE sono molti. Il principale è di confermare e consolidare i dati che noi abbiamo già raccolto in passato, che la gravidanza dopo un tumore al seno non è pericolosa anche nelle donne i cui tumori vengono nutriti dagli ormoni femminili.
Quando dal mio oncologo mi è stata prospettata la possibilità di entrare a far parte di questo studio POSITIVE, mi è sembrato di essere, come dire, al posto giusto nel momento giusto.
Lo studio consente una pausa nel trattamento.
Quindi ho interrotto la cura, la terapia ormonale che stavo seguendo fino a quel momento, e dopo alcuni mesi ho scoperto di aspettare mia figlia.
È uno studio che ha bisogno di 500 pazienti per poter definire gli obiettivi primari e secondari dello studio, ed è uno studio che si avvale di una collaborazione internazionale. È condotto e coordinato dall'International Breast Cancer Study Group. Il futuro è poter offrire una reale possibilità, e lo studio POSITIVE permette di avere i dati e le evidenze per spiegare alle pazienti quali sono queste possibilità e poter quindi riuscire a coronare il sogno della gravidanza dopo il tumore mammario.
Far capire che bisogna parlare anche del proprio desiderio di maternità e che questo non necessariamente mette a rischio la propria vita, credo che è la sfida di noi curanti in questo percorso di accompagnamento.
Credo che la nascita sia il simbolo più potente in assoluto e quindi bisogna assolutamente preservare questo grande dono che abbiamo, la vita.
Wow, what a great video. And that gave us really an in-depth idea of what is the positive study. We would like to learn from the three of you, how did the patient-partner clinician collaboration begin in the positive study? Teresa, could you please tell us a bit about the patient perspective?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, first of all, Alexandre, for inviting me and to be part of this webinar. It's an honor, and watching the video again makes me go back to when we started. And well, in answer to your question, how it started, I was contacted by one of the doctors here in Spain with whom I was collaborating already. I was a patient advocate for a charity where we were helping women become moms after breast cancer. And it was kind of they needed a patient, and I was there as a patient representative, and it was like a perfect fit for all of us. That's how it started.
Olivia, can you please tell us a bit about from the scientific, from the researcher perspective, how did it started for you?
Well, pregnant. Good morning, good evening, everyone, and thank you also from my side of putting this webinar on. Well, from my side and from our side, the question about safety of pregnancy after breast cancer was there since many years. And we had a lot of retrospective data, which were reassuring. But all the scientific community was skeptical, many of them, and especially those who were in contact with patients, which means GPs, oncologists, gynecologists. They discouraged women to become pregnant and to have babies after breast cancer because of the boom of hormones and all these stupid things. So we needed some sound and scientific data. And so we started from what we knew from studies which asked patients about their desire of pregnancy. And also with the International Breast Cancer Study Group, we were conducting a study, a prospective study in women younger than 40 years. And which were some surveys and questionnaires asking many things about their disease over time. And that study confirmed the desire of pregnancy in women who had breast cancer young. And it was almost half of these women desired children before the disease. And 2/3 still desired children after the diagnosis. And 15% of them decided not to follow the treatments because of the risk of becoming infertile. So this was really a very strong push. And then we did another thing. So we asked patients, and around 200 patients, if they would have accepted to participate in a clinical trial addressing this question. And a huge amount of these days, almost 50% of these women, especially the younger, and those who had already received endocrine therapy for 2 to 3 years, said very clearly, we would like to participate in a study. So we had this background, and from that on, we started thinking that this was feasible, despite a very difficult study. Maybe we will talk about the difficulties later on. And it was worth to embark in such a difficult study because we had clear data from patients that this was needed.
Thank you. Olivia, can you describe the journey of the collaboration, including specific examples of patient involvement at the various stages of the positive study, starting with formulating the research question?
So the research question was based on what we already knew. So we wanted to demonstrate with solid scientific prospective data that women who wanted to become mothers after the disease were not crazy. We all knew in our clinical practice, for example, that many women do that irrespective of what their doctors tell them or think, because women are very strong. And so we wanted to provide these women the data they needed not to be considered crazy. So at that time, it was not common to have patients involved in the design of clinical trials. So this was not the case in the positive trial as well. But we, as you saw the video, we involved patients in the promotion of the idea and in the diffusion of this, and Monica will speak about that much better than me, in the diffusion of the idea, in the involvement of their doctors. And so it was really a strong push. And then, of course, it was important during the conduction of the trial, because they were involved, and Monica will explain this in the steering committee, in the ethical committee, and so on. And then in the diffusion of the data when the trial was concluded and we finally had the data.
Thank you. Monica, can you give your perspective on all those points that Olivia has raised?
Yeah, sure. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, also from my side. It's a pleasure to participate in this webinar. This is a not topic and needs to be discussed. Yes, as Olivia said, really at that time, it is still a long trip. We started in 2012 in prioritizing really the research question and conceptualizing the trial, and it's still ongoing and will finish in 2030. So as you can see here really clearly from the bar, so in 2013, when we developed the protocol, so patients were not involved in this development. And there is a reason. So first of all, at that time, research happened for or to patients, not with patients. And they did not play really an active role in the development of a research. So and that was also the case for positive, because actually a protocol, first of all, I think it's important to say what a protocol is, because not everyone knows that. And it is a document that really describes the background, the rationale, so the reason why the research is conducted, the objectives, the design, the methodology, and the procedures, and the enrollment criteria, so which patient needs to participate in this trial, and which data and how these data are collected. The statistical consideration, meaning which statistical model would be applicable to evaluate, to analyze this data, and the organization of the study, the governance of the study. So it is really a critical document that serves to ensure the safety of the trial participants and the integrity of the data that are collected throughout the trial. And it's a technical document. So to participate in this development, and we will come to this later on, is some expertise is needed. So, but for us, it was clear from the very beginning. So after the protocol development, of course, the protocol before the activation should have been approved by the ethics committee, and that was the case. So the ethics committee of IBCLG, so International Breast Cancer Study Group, evaluated the protocol, and in the ethics committee, a patient advocate is a member. And she had a crucial role because she provided input that led to adjustment, for example, of the patient information sheet and informed consent, another key document for the participation of patients. The patient needs to understand what the trial is about, what are the procedures, need to consent. And so the language, sometimes as a researcher, we tend to use a too scientific jargon. So this patient helped to really to improve the comprehension of this document. And after that, it was clear for us that the patient should have been involved in monitoring the progress of the trial. And for this, we involved the patient in the steering committee. And again, what is the steering committee? So is a committee that is responsible for maintaining the scientific integrity of a trial and really supervise all the progress and discuss potential action to be taken, for example, in light of new data coming from other trials. So it is a critical committee along the trial. So for this, we involved 3 patient advocates because the positive trial is an international trial. It's conducted in 20 countries worldwide. And we thought only a patient is not enough, would not be representative of the diversity of the population participating in this trial. And that's why we approached actually our collaborative groups that participated in positive and asked to identify patients that would be interested and committed to participate in such a long trial. And that's why Teresa, so we approached this collaborative group, the SALTI Spanish collaborative group, who then approached Teresa, who was really committed to this topic since then and had even a website to promote really pregnancy after breast cancer. And after that, the patients had a really crucial role in positive. And they really participating. So when we started this study, of course, pregnancy was a taboo. The recruitment in the study was not easy at all at the beginning. So we decided with the patient advocate to develop a video, a positive awareness video, the shorter version that you have just seen. And 2 patients were involved, a patient advocate and the participants of the positive trial. And as you could see from the video, so their voice absolutely was crucial and helped substantially to raise awareness about the availability of this trial among patients community and scientific community. And this helped substantially. And in addition to that, patients participated actively in the fundraising events. So they were coming with us to be testimonial because, as I said, their voice is much stronger and much more understandable than research voices. So they were crucial in helping really raising funds for positive. And last but not least, in the dissemination of the results. We have just in 2022, the results of the primary analysis were shared and published, and the patient advocates really helped with disseminating to their communities with posts, social media, and everything in a very active way. So it's I have to say positive in terms of patient involvement. Really, throughout the study, is a successful experience.
Thank you,
I
Monica.
just would like to add something, and maybe Teresa could add also something. I think that, looking again at the video, I think positive was possibly in breast cancer research the first and maybe the only, unfortunately, example of giving patients the power, because they were involved, and so they had an active role, not in the writing of the protocol, as Monica said, but in the conduction, in the promotion. And as I said before, they were considered crazy when they were thinking of having a baby after breast cancer. And so they had now the power to change the vision of this problem, and being really partner, and not just have a passive role. They have an active role. They became partner, and they raise power, which is helpful, because also now many women face a lot of challenges when discussing with their doctors, despite the results of the positive study. But now they have this power. They have the data. They contributed to create this data. And so this put them in a very different position when they are discussing their treatment and their disease. I don't know if you agree, Teresa, on that.
I totally agree. When we first started collaborating, Olivia was describing in the beginning how it happened, and on my side, I had already had my own path. I was one of those patients who wanted to be a mother after breast cancer, and who said no to treatment, to hormone therapy, and my oncologist had to accept. And he put it in, because otherwise he wouldn't have a patient anymore. Somehow I would go and find someone else. So when I started that journey, that's when I realized how important it was to empower women so they could raise their voices. So totally I agree with the need that we had to be supported, and also to raise our voice in front of society and say, hey, this is our dream, and we are the ones entitled to decide. I mean, I had people telling me, you're gonna get pregnant and leave an orphan in this world? I mean, how can someone say something like that to a person who already went through breast cancer and is really pursuing their dream without knowledge at all of what they are talking about? So this is why the positive was so important to me, because after that, when I wanted to empower women, that's when I created an NGO to really support these women and raise money for them to become pregnant, and raise awareness, because at that time in Spain, nothing really was happening. There was Salty, and they were kind of starting to do things. So when we got together, it was really the time to start making noise and start supporting other patients. So after that process started, that journey started, the way I was welcomed in the steering committee and by the team was amazing. I received all the information. They were super open with everything. They invited me to give a talk for all the members. So somehow I also felt that I was sharing my experience and sharing my perspective that they already shared, as I can see, and Olivia described and Monica described, that they were very aware of how women were experiencing that. And I had not only my personal experience, but also that one of many women who were coming to me, sharing that part. So that also gave me a lot of power, going back to these women and saying, hey, this is safe. Well, I couldn't say that it was safe back then because we were working on that, but I could say we are so many who are working on this because we want to change things. So bear with us, because there is hope. There is a lot of hope. And so that was also a part of my job, was to also recruit women those women who will come to me, I could offer them, do you want to be part of this study? And yeah, and that's how everything happened.
Wow, such a powerful example of empowerment of people. Teresa, how do you think are effective ways of involving patients? You mentioned so many different aspects of patient involvement.
Yeah, and I think one of the key factors to involve patients, really involve them, is to have a deep connection with the topic. And what I mean is that for me, the positive trial is my trial. I mean, it was specially created for me. I felt it part of me because it was part of my life purpose somehow. This is the message I wanted to share with other people. So really finding the person, finding the patient who is sharing the cause is very important. Also, helping the patients share their experience with the researchers, with the scientific industry, even with all those members who maybe don't know how practical this is and how this is impacting patients and lives, I think is also very important. And from a level of a partnership, always. So giving the patient the chance to be treated as an equal, because that also helps feel that, hey, we are bringing in some added value.
And I think we showed that it is feasible. It's not a dream. It is feasible. And you need, as Monica said before, maybe we can explore this a little bit more. We need patients' competence, of course. We need investigators listening to patients and their needs. And also how we, as Monica said, how we build the trial. Sometimes as researchers, as clinicians, we do not consider being part of a trial is a job and puts the patient in a difficult situation because puts additional pressure, additional appointments, for example, additional exams. And so it's much more complicated being participating to a trial. So, but we never ask the patient before if they are willing to do that. Even if the question is so important as positive, we realized that some investigations that are part of the trial were very heavy for the patients. So going back, if the patients would have participated in the construction of the protocol, as Monica mentioned, maybe some of these exams, of the frequency of this exam, would have been different. So I think it's not only participating in the design, so in the idea of the trial, the question of the trial, but also how to construct the trial and the conduction of the trial and the practical part of the trial should be, we should ask patients if this is feasible. For example, in young women, they work, they have their families, so many things cannot be affordable, cannot be feasible for them. And so if they are, as Monica said, the participation in the ethics committee changed the informed consent. Having the patients part of the trial since the construction and the design would have maybe changed some examinations, some investigations that we put in the trial but were not reasonable in real life. So there are, I think, many aspects to this extent.
No, this is, I think, a really important point, because what we see is there is, in one side, the need to change the scientific community's perception of patient involvement and how they think this dynamic should work, to a perception of a partnership dynamic where actually there's benefit for both sides. And this actually triggers my next question to you, Olivia. which is how do you think it's a balanced way between maintaining the research rigor and addressing patient needs?
I don't think there is a contrast between these two aspects. I think they should be one thing. So I think, of course, you need to accommodate, as I mentioned, you need patients' competence. Research is complex. Scientific questions are complex. So you need patients who understand, not just, they want to become mothers, making the example of positive, but they understand the complexity of that. They understand which is why it was a taboo, because of the, hormonal boom during pregnancy. So they need to understand what's the background, the scientific background. And so you cannot find this partnership easily. And I imagine in other cancers or in other diseases which are complex. So you need to build up a competence. You need to have dedicated patients. Maybe Monica and Teresa could touch this much more in detail. So it's this partnership is not just a word. You need to build a partnership. You need to, as Monica said, we asked the cooperative groups to identify the right patients. There are not so many there. So you need to identify, you need to build a relationship, you need to work with them. And so it's a sort of work within the scientific work, and requires resources, timing, and so it's very nice, but it's also time consuming, and you need to have the energy and the willingness to develop such a partnership.
Alexandra, I would like to add something here about the balance of scientific rigor and of course patient needs. I think the end point of a trial so needs to focus really on the patient needs, and then there are the secondary endpoints where you can investigate many other features related eventually to the main research question. The thing is, as Olivia said, so we need to see if and to evaluate the feasibility, especially in academic research and purely academic research like a positive trial. We could have investigated much more or many more features, but we had to evaluate the availability of the patients, for example, of having all this investigation done, and the funding. So it's really designing the research question properly, and balance really with the feasibility of all the investigation, which question could be answered. So it is this is a critical thing from the very beginning, because if you are wrong there, of course, we learned across the trial, as Olivia says, some investigation we could be avoided in the sense that we had to stop those investigations because the patients were not willing to undergo for example, invasive investigations. So we had an endometrial biopsy. It was optional, for example, just to make a concrete example. But at a certain moment, we realized patients were not undergoing to these investigations. And during the steering committee, we discussed this among the steering committee and with patients involved, to say it's completely useless to go on and to ask the patient to undergo this evaluation where we won't have probably enough numbers, enough cases to answer the questions. So I'm pretty sure if the patients were involved in the development, we would have avoided this examination, and we would have avoided the work associated to this examination, the procedure that we developed to do this investigation. So that's the example. There are other examples, but then we take too long. But it is really like that.
Thank you. Teresa, I wanted to ask you first the next question. As partners of in this study, what do you expect from each other?
What a great question. What I expect from my partners is, well, first of all, respect, obviously, towards me and my time and what I can bring in, and the value that we can bring in without judgment. So I expect a place where I can be open and share without feeling that I'm going to be right or wrong. And I expect understanding from the fact, I don't know if it's understanding or awareness of the fact that I'm not necessarily a scientist, but that doesn't mean that I am less or more. I am who I am, and with everything I bring. I think that's fundamental. What I would love to have is some compensation as well, in monetary compensation, which was not the case in the positive, and I'm fine with that because that was very clear in the beginning, and because again it's really close to my heart. I'm part of other committees where that exists, and I think it's fair because it exists for everybody, and because as we said, it's a job. I also expect honesty. I wouldn't want to find out that they're doing things and I'm not aware of them. So, for example, I don't know, they are taking decisions that they are not bringing to the steering committee, or that they are not sharing with me because they think I might not understand the technical difficulties or challenges. So I would expect that patience. Yeah. And that's all speculation because I got all of that and a lot more. So yeah, I think it's at the end of the day is what we all expect from other human beings, right? To be seen and perceived as equals and feel welcome and seen as who we are. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Olivia, from your side.
Well, I think more or less the same, because I think that personally, I never think that patients cannot understand. I have 40 years experience, and I can, I can swear that patients do understand if you are clear enough. So I don't think this is an issue. If they don't understand even complex situations, and research is not more complex than disease. When you are explaining patients a very complex treatment, or their prognosis is much, much more complex than research. And so there is nothing they cannot understand if you are clear enough. So I think that working with patients in clinical research make you improve your ways of sharing difficult questions in an understandable way. So I think it's something which empowers us as well. Because Monica was mentioning before informed consent. Sometimes there are informed consent sheets, 30 pages, in an absolutely ununderstandable language. It's not a matter if you are a patient or an investigator. You do not understand anyway. So I think this is a sort of fear, and you want to protect yourself. So when you make yourself not understandable, it means that you are not clear enough with yourself. So I think this involving patients in research helps investigators being clear also in their clinical practice. And then, of course, we expect honesty, we expect respect, we expect competence, as I said before. So not everyone can do that, but it's like, not every clinician can be a researcher. It's not, it's not good or bad, as Teresa said. And being, committed, Monica said it's a very long trial. So commitment is really important. And so we expect commitment. We would like to give compensation, but positive is a really academic trial. But I think this is a key issue. Because if you want patients to be competent and you require commitment, long-term commitment, especially when they are young and they work and they have families, you need to compensate this time and commitment and knowledge. And so I think this is very important. But I think it has to be clear, the risk is that you buy their consent. So this can be a risk, especially in a funded trial. So you pay patients to have them, to make them saying yes to everything. So I think this is a very tricky, and we need to implement this collaboration in a better way and in a safe way, because this happens with investigators as well.
Thank you. Monica, would you like to add something?
Yeah, in terms of expectation, I think expectation depend very much on the objectives of the involvement and for example, which phase of the trial. And I think it is critical to identify exactly what contribution is requested expected from a patient. And for example, it is only the experience of the patient with the disease that is important, or could the patient contribute more? And here I come to expectations. Somehow, if the contribution is more, then I think a little bit of training and, to understand the processes of a research project would be required if the involvement needs to be really in the development of a trial. And I think, I think there are a few projects or a platform or resources available for patients now since a few years. For example, there is the EUPATI platform that provided really training to patient advocates to improve their knowledge about designing a research project. I expect some commitment from the beginning in that respect. And I expect when we come to develop something really together and we are in an equal, so we as a researcher, we need to change our mindset and really to create this comfortable and equal space. But I think patients, getting a little bit of background, a little bit of training, to also eventually mentorship, this would help substantially to create these equal spaces. So somehow is a commitment from both sides, in elevating a little bit this collaboration to be really a partnership, to be really very productive. And I think there are tools, but more projects are, in my opinion, needed. More involvement is needed. And here I come also to compensation and to say, of course, positive is really an academic study, long study with an important budget. And I think, I mean, the role here of Rising Tide is actually and currently crucial, because I think Rising Tide is demanding this, mandate us to allocate some resources for patient involvement, mandate us to compensate the patients. We were not in the position, we didn't have fund to do that, and we just counted on the commitment of patients that was there. But I always felt very uncomfortable for that, very uncomfortable. So, and I fully understand the expectation of Teresa and the other patients advocates involved. But we were not in the position to pay anything, because we didn't have funding, you know, even to complete the study. So of course it becomes then an issue of priorities. And if you have someone that is committed and available without compensation, okay, let's go without compensation, because there are other priorities. We need to complete the study. The fact that Rising Tide mandates this, I think, is a crucial thing. And yeah, thank you for doing that. Of course, this creates this creates work, additional work, you know, in terms of developing also project and the kind of involvement where you need also to provide the feedback about this involvement, to measure the effectiveness of this involvement. And I think this is troublesome for some extent, but put us in the corner to do that. And I think this is critical.
I just wanted to add something, that it should be mandatory from regulatory to have patients involved since the beginning and to compensate them. Then I have a question for Teresa, because seeing again the video, I think that how difficult it is if you are a patient. I think this requires additional competence, not to be there as Teresa, but in favor of all patients. In the video, in the beginning, the two women, one was a participant of the positive trial, another one was a patient advocate, and as she mentioned, she had breast cancer at 38 years, and she was not able to have children after the disease. So she was not there because of her possibility to profit from the trial. But she was there because she knew how important it was, even if she was not able to have this dream. So I think this is an additional difficulty, to be there for all the patients, but you are a patient with your individuality. So I think I would like a comment from your side.
Thank you for raising that. It has its challenges sometimes, not to look at it from your own perspective, especially if you couldn't be a mom and you see that now others are. Maybe it starts, you know, awakening in you some painful feelings of what if. But then on the other hand, there is this part of giving others the chances that you miss, or, you know, it can even be part of your legacy in life. And it also helps you give a meaning to the disease, to know that, wow, thanks to you being there, you being whoever, other people can benefit from what you've learned. Yeah. So somehow, again, we go back to we talk about compensation, and, you know, compensation, yeah, we might talk about money, but it goes far beyond that. It's about what brings to me the fulfillment of knowing that this has a deeper meaning. And it's not only for the patient, it's also for the scientists, for all the participants. And the positive is, I think it's especially moving in this sense. I mean, the video is, and bringing life back after what we went through, it is so, so powerful, so powerful. I remember when I was pregnant, suddenly cancer didn't matter anymore. Relapsing wasn't an option because everything was about the baby. And life changes. It's huge. So I think that's also worth mentioning, that compensation comes with that, what we are bringing and giving to others. Mhm.
Thank you, Teresa. I think this brings us to a very nice part of our webinar, which is to share from your first hand what were the learnings and challenges you have encountered. I think you can start, Teresa. You were in such a nice track now.
Thank you. One of my main learnings was that I'm not crazy for wanting to be a mom. There are many others. And also that, hey, we can work together, and together we are stronger. Yeah, I think for now I will say that. Let's listen to Olivia and Monica, and maybe I will come back with some other learnings.
Well, I think we learned, as I mentioned, to build a partnership which is complex. Clinical trials are complex. And so I think every research question has its own complexity. So if you want to build a partnership, you need, as we said, to consider patients as equal. And then it's a journey. You build it because we are, different persons. And so we need to learn how to work together. But we have an aim, an objective, which in this case was pregnancy after breast cancer, but can be a treatment, can be a different way of delivering drugs or whatever. And so we need to build this collaboration, but we need to have some pillars, which is, as I said, respect, competence, commitment. What we learned, as we already said before, is that, but it was not feasible and common at that time, if we had involved patients since the very beginning, so in the design and the building of the protocol, many other things could have been different. For example, avoiding uterine biopsy could have allowed to pay patients, for example. So I think we learned a lot. And I think it was, for me, now it is unbelievable not to involve patients in the design and development of clinical trials, because I think it's an added value. And yes, and so I think it should, as I mentioned, as I said, it should be mandatory in all clinical trials, but not just to have patients there, because sometimes now it's fashionable to have patients involved, but a true collaboration and a true partnership, which is something you build over time.
Thank you. Monica, would you like to talk about your experience?
I think I learned a lot during this trip, and I think it's it's a long journey, and I'm not a clinician, and I think that working closely with patients forced me to discuss my work in more accessible language, and for avoiding all this scientific jargon, and really as a result, I improve my ability to share the rationale of the positive trial and the results of the positive trial with a wider audience, with the lay public, and this ultimately helped me a lot with fundraising. And having the patient with me in all these things, events, or, working together in a grant application, for example, and everything helped me dramatically to improve this. At the beginning, was very, very difficult. People were not understanding me. And the patient, I learned a lot from them, from their experience. And I have to say, not being also a clinician, but responsible for a program for young patients at IBCG, working with patients helped me to understand also the priorities, because so the clinician come to us with the ideas, but not being in contact with patients to evaluate the priorities and what should be done or not is difficult. And working closely with patients helped me a lot to understand what were the priorities, the research priorities. So I think it's really a great experience that I strongly really support, promote now and ever, because is improving, and I think is also the reason why the positive study has been successful so far, as one of the reasons, and the commitment. And as Teresa said also before, for example, being presenting in a steering committee, which is something not usually very common. Time is very limited, straightforward. Let's go to see the data. Very much we think in terms of data. Patient thinks in terms of feeling, but this is needed, and this is the reason why then we collect also the data. So we need to answer, to address their needs, and hearing from them in these meetings and everything really help us. Hey, we need to go on. We don't want to give up. Conducting a positive trial is a challenging trial in every aspect. So, but and without patients involved, this would have been difficult.
And I think, just to add a couple of words, I think that in clinical research, cancer research, or whatever, involvement of patients makes research closer to real life. As the summary of what Monica said, makes research closer to real life and to what's going on outside your rooms.
Yeah, and perhaps that's one of the challenges for us as patients, to be able to digest, understand the information that we receive, and process it so that to bring it down to our world, right? And so maybe the challenge is somehow for all of us is to find that common language that Monica was talking about, where we can all share feelings and data, knowing that it's for a greater good, right?
Hey, thank you so much for your participation today. We had a really very interesting, inspiring webinar. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.